Hi, I'm your host, Anand J. Sukadia, and this is the Limitless One podcast. Join me on this journey as I interview the most inspirational souls who are tapping into their limitless blueprint on a mental, physical, and spiritual level to thrive in uncertain times. If you feel you are so much more than just this body, just this life, and want to tap into your limitless potential, you're in the right place. Here we go, starseeds. Do you know anyone suffering from Lyme disease? Did you also know that through alternative treatments, there is tremendous hope and potential cures out there? Lyme is not a sentence for lifelong dis-ease. Our guest today is on a personal mission to heal himself, and we are blessed to hear his story. Welcome to the Limitless One podcast, Starseeds. I am your host, Anand J. Sukadia. We want to welcome to the podcast a very inspirational soul, Mike Irizarry. Mike was healthy for most of his life, or at least he thought he was. Mike was very athletic and played sports throughout his high school years. Right before he got sick with Lyme, he was well into the process of becoming a law enforcement officer in New Jersey while having a great position working for a technology company. Seemingly, he was on top of the world as things were going well for him and his family. Suddenly, without any warning, sickness struck unexpectedly in 2018. Little did he know that the next couple of years would be the darkest moments of his life, where eventually he became bedridden. Mike was eventually diagnosed with Lyme in 2019 after multiple failed attempts to find answers for his mystery symptoms that over 30 doctors could not figure out. After many failed attempts in seeking treatment that worked, he was also eventually led and guided to natural medicine and the wonderful healing it provided him in rebalancing his entire health and life. Mike now has his life back and still continues to educate himself on health and wellness. Welcome to the podcast, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for allowing me to come on your podcast and to share my story and to hopefully give other people hope.
Beautiful. And I met you a couple of weeks ago. We were at House of Flavors in Bayonne. It's a vegan, plant-based restaurant, amazing vibe, amazing energy. And every time I go there with my buddy, Eric, who probably be on the podcast eventually, but we always meet the most amazing people. And as soon as I walk in, you're already talking to Eric, who's waiting for me. And Eric's like, man, you gotta hear Mike's story. And when I listened to it, it's so funny because you were telling me about how you went through this whole journey, and we'll get into the deep end of that. But one of my good friends, Ashish, he was like literally diagnosed the day before with Lyme disease and a little bit of arthritis, and he was kind of down. So it was like perfect synchronicity of the universe bringing us all together. So I could introduce you to Ashish and then have your story be told on the Limitless One podcast. So just, really grateful for you, and your energy is amazing. So I'm so glad that we're getting to have this conversation.
Yeah, awesome, man. It's funny because that day, I wasn't supposed to go into House of Flavor, but it was kind of like a last minute thing. By the way, that's like my go-to spot in Bayonne. Awesome people, awesome staff. Like you said, awesome. I always come across awesome people in there and interesting conversations. But yeah, I spoke with Ashish, and just kind of, it was awesome how that all worked out. Like I walked in there, I didn't think I was gonna, run into Eric, and Eric introduced me and you, and then, you led me to Ashish. So it was awesome how everything, just worked out.
Yeah, it's all divine connections. So Mike, before we get into this, let me ask you a question. What does living a limitless life mean to you?
To me, living a limitless life is living a life not controlled by fear, right? Living a life where, you have dreams, you have goals, and you're going to do what it takes to obtain those things, and really enjoying life. I think sometimes, we can look at life as if we have tomorrow promised and we don't. And, in my personal opinion, it wasn't until I dealt with sickness and I saw how fragile people really are. So, now that I'm on the other side of that, living a limitless life to me, again, means not living in fear, enjoying life, enjoying, the beautiful relationships that God brings into your life, and embracing those relationships, and just kind of just going after, your goals, your desires, and just, again, really appreciating life in itself. Life is beautiful. So I would say, in my opinion, just all of that summed up into one is kind of, what living a limitless life for me is. Not having boundaries in regards to, I joined jujitsu. I always wanted to do that, but I always let fear stop me. And, if it wasn't for me going through my sickness, and now saying, what, life is short. Let me just go and try those things that I always wanted to try. So living a limitless life, again, is not letting fear hold you back, and really appreciating the gift of life that God has given us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, obviously we live here on earth, and fear is a big part of that. But then we have to understand, what is our relationship to that fear? Does it motivate us to say, okay, yeah, listen, there are things out there. Are we going to play small and not expand ourselves and grow mentally, physically, spiritually? Or are we going to use that as motivation to really live the best life that we can? And, a lot of times when fear is being put on us, in society today, there's so much fear being thrown at us on every level. But what are we going to do with that fear? Once it comes to us, are we going to, like in jujitsu, you're using other people's momentum to kind of move aside and use their brute force against them, right? So are we taking that fear? Are we letting it smack us in the face? Or are we just moving to the side, let it go by, and then show the world how powerful we are? Because we're all sovereign, loving beings that have infinite potential. So that's really why I started this podcast, is to interview amazing people that, they've had some adversity in life, but they're such shining examples of how to overcome fear and really live with purpose and live in their hearts. So yeah, man, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to this place. Who were you before you started this journey, and who are you now?
Yeah, so a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Jersey City, New Jersey. It's considered North New Jersey, right outside of Manhattan, maybe 10, 15 minutes off the path. Raised by a single mother, had two sisters. Again, I grew up, at least I thought I was healthy. Never really had issues at the doctor, played sports. I kind of just stood in this area for the most part of my life. Now I reside in Bayonne, Hudson County. But yeah, again, somebody, I've always been healthy, working at a young age. I started working at 14, 15, handing out flyers in downtown Jersey City for a local gym. So I've always been an active person, never, somebody who's out of shape for the most part. And now I'm married. I have two daughters. I've been married for about 10 years. I love being a father, love being a husband. Has definitely just changed me as a person for the better. I'm a big family person. Before, I was really never into health, to be honest with you. I never really cared what I ate. I was somebody, I just like the fast food. Friday nights, we're ordering Domino's. If the wife's running late from work, we're gonna stop and get Burger King on the way home. I would kind of consider my life like your average American. Average American diet. Playing sports. And again, it wasn't until 2018 till all of that kind of took a twist and the unexpected happened.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about 2018. What actually happens to you?
Yeah. So 2018, I was working again for a technology company. I'm a technician, so I fixed office equipment. A little bit of IT work is involved with that. And 2018, everything was going well. I had a awesome job. I was married, had two daughters. I was enjoying life. I was also in the process to become a law enforcement officer. I had took the test that year, or 2 years prior, and they contacted me. They took my name off the off the state list, and they wanted to start me in the process to eventually get hired. So I was excited. I'm like, this is awesome. This is my childhood dream. I always wanted to be a cop. Finally, this opportunity is presenting itself, and I was excited. I was thinking for the best. I thought 2018 was going to be a year that a lot of my dreams were going to be fulfilled. And then the summer of 2018, I started experiencing mild symptoms, and looking back at it, it was a lot of symptoms that I kind of brushed off, and I thought, hey, you know what, maybe I'm just out of shape, I'm not working out as much, or I ignored. But some of those symptoms was shortness of breath. I noticed that doing simple tasks was taking the air out of me. As simple as being home and laughing with my family. If we're joking around and I was laughing, I felt like I was getting winded quick, which wasn't normal for me. I was getting a ton of skipped heartbeats. I had leg pain, migraines, dizziness, off balance. It just seemed like I couldn't walk straight, a lot of vertigo. And one of the major symptoms that really struck like something's wrong was they found that my ejection fraction was low. The ejection fraction is the pumping ability of the heart. And a healthy ejection fraction should be 65 or up. And they found my ejection fraction was at 44%.
Wow.
And the symptoms, just continued to add and add. And I mean, it was so many symptoms, to be honest with you, I can't even remember all of them. That's how much symptoms were happening. But 2018, I started having symptoms, and I said, something's wrong. I made an appointment with my my physician. He did regular traditional blood work, and he didn't see anything wrong. He did say that my cholesterol was slightly elevated, which I was like, that's definitely my diet, because I was eating horrible. And he told me just to change my diet, and he quickly prescribed medication to lower my cholesterol, a statin drug. So I started doing that. I started changing my diet around, and my symptoms weren't going away. As a matter of fact, they were getting worse. And I'm like, something's definitely wrong. And I just felt like there was something wrong with my heart. So I went back again. I said, Doc, something's wrong. Like, I don't feel right. I feel sick. I'm not making this up. And, he ran some more blood work. He did a traditional Western blot test, which checks for Lyme. That came out negative. And then he ordered a echocardiogram, which is a sonogram of the heart. And when I went back for the follow-up, his exact words to me was, Chief, you need to see a cardiologist right away. And, here I am, I'm 27, 28. I'm like, okay, why do I need to see a cardiologist for? And he didn't want to tell me at the moment. He just said, see a cardiologist. They specialize in the heart. They'll explain to you what's going on. That night, I did something that sometimes doesn't benefit you. I started Googling and researching stuff, and I'm over here diagnosing myself. But when you research low ejection fraction, that's signs for heart failure. Automatically I start thinking, oh my goodness, something's wrong with my heart. Like, I'm only 28. Like, I have 2 daughters. I have a wife. What the heck is going on? So I followed his instructions. I made an appointment with a cardiologist. I couldn't see him for about 2-3 weeks. And in the meantime, I just got super, super sick. I had a hard time walking. The shortness of breath was increasing. I ended up going to the hospital multiple times. Every time they discharged me and told me they couldn't find anything wrong. So what I did was, while I was waiting to see his cardiologist, another doctor put me on Entresto, which is a heart failure medication, to try to get the pumping of the heart to work a little bit more efficiently while I wait. And that just tore me up. I got worse. And finally, I had the appointment with the cardiologist. He had me do a stress test. That came out normal. And then he ordered something called a MUGA scan, which is where it's a more thorough test that really gets a better look at the heart and the pumping ability. And that came out, and it showed that my pumping was 64. And he's like, your heart's good. He said, there's nothing wrong. Your heart's good. The echo showed that, but it could have been a viral infection that hit your heart, and now your heart's recovering. So I'm like, okay, but I didn't have an explanation for the whole list of symptoms I was experiencing. Mm-hmm. At that point, I'm like, okay, what do I do? My doctor's telling me everything's good. The cardiologist cleared me, regardless of me having a low ejection fraction, and putting me on heart failure medication. So I said, I'm gonna find answers. Something's wrong. And my job as a technician, I'm very technical, right? So if I see something wrong, I right away tell myself, okay, something has to be causing that, right? And when I'm not a doctor, but when I looked at the echocardiogram and I was researching everything, I saw that my heart was inflamed, and I saw that my EF shouldn't be going up and down. And again, me having a mechanical mind, I'm like, okay, I started troubleshooting my body. You know, and it kind of sounds crazy, but that's how I think as a technician. You know, I fix things, and you know, it just wasn't making sense. So I decided that was kind of the beginning of my, you know, search for finding answers. And I kid you not, you know, within that time frame of me trying to look for answers, I saw every type of specialist. I saw infectious disease, neurologists, rheumatologists, Lyme literate doctors. I mean, and the list goes on. And I saw every best health institute in New Jersey, you know, and then I started searching in New York. I said, if the New Jersey doctors can't find what's wrong, I'm going to go to where, you know, the really good institutes are, like
the best of the best.
Exactly. And that's what I did. I went to Columbia University, New York Presbyterian, and Mount Sinai, and nobody could figure out what was going on. And at this point, I would say this was the summer of 2018. Now we're kind of getting to the end of the summer of 2018. I'm getting more sick. Now my hands are getting like clammy and pale, and I can see my veins. It was scary. I mean, it was like all my veins were out. And when I showed this to the doctors, they didn't seem concerned about it. And I'm like, this is not normal. You know, how is this not a concern? You know, at least it wasn't normal for me. So again, nobody gave me answers. And it wasn't until a friend of mine told me, he said, look, Mike, he said, I think that you might have Lyme disease. He said, I know a friend and a family member who has had Lyme, and it wasn't easily diagnosed. You know, the tests are not 100% accurate. And, you know, and so I made an appointment with another Lyme literate doctor. I went to this Lyme doctor in Jersey. They did a whole bunch of more advanced tests, and I'm thinking I'm going to have answers. And every test came out negative. And her words to me was, I can't help you. And, you know, at that point, I'm like, you know, this is crazy. Like, I felt so discouraged. I'm like, you know, I know something's wrong. I'm doing the right thing, and I'm trying to seek answers, and I'm being left looking like a fool. And, you know, twice I was told that it was all in my head. You know, one doctor told me that if I would have kept on trying to seek answers, that I would end up in a mental institute. And, you know, looking back at that now, that can be very traumatizing. You know, it's almost, you know, like they're looking at you like you're crazy. You know, and I've read stories, and I actually spoke to a guy who dealt with Lyme, and he was sick. He got so sick that he actually ended up in a mental institute because of how bad the Lyme got, and it was attacking his neurological system. It was in his brain. So, I mean, you know, it was very discouraging, you know, because these are professionals who, growing up, I always looked up, you know, to, and I'm thinking that they're going to try to find what's going on, and they're going to believe me. And that wasn't the case. They looked at me like I was crazy. They told me that that it was all in my head, right? And I remember one doctor I saw at Mount Sinai. This is a top doctor. I mean, he's like well known. And you know, he looked at me, and he pretty much told me that, you know, like, he put it in nice words, but say, you're going crazy. You don't have Lyme disease. You don't have you know, anything else going on with you, and you need to cut the crap out, pretty much. And, you know, I was so discouraged, brother, that I literally just broke down crying in his office. And, you know, it was very embarrassing, because here I am, a grown man, you know, I'm not getting answers. I have this doctor who's supposed to help me, and he tells me to cut the nonsense out. And, you know, I walked out of that office so discouraged. You know, looking back at it now, I remember the day so clearly. You know, I left the office, and I just felt so hopeless. You know, I was waiting outside for my Uber, you know, to come back into New Jersey. And I just felt, literally what I did was, you know, I prayed, and I'm like, Lord, why are you allowing this to happen to me? Mm-hmm. You know, I've been you know, a faithful Christian for all these years. And this is what I get in return, is to deal with this sickness and people to look at me like I'm crazy. And it was a very humbling experience for me. And it definitely just, it was a time that I look back at now and I'm like, man, how did I make it through the beginning of what eventually got even more darker? So at that point, you know, I had no answers from any of the doctors, none of the health institutes that I you know, went to visit. And again, my friend insisted. He said, Mike, I know the Lyme disease test came out negative. I know about this lab in California. They're called Igenics, and they specialize in tick-borne illness. And he said, I want you to have your blood drawn at the local hospital, and we're going to send your blood work there. And that's what I did. I sent my blood work to Igenics. And in the meantime, somebody told me about a doctor in South Jersey, in Long Branch. And he's a chiropractor, and he deals with the body holistically. They said to go see him, check him out. I think this guy can help you. And that's what I did while I was waiting for the results from Igenics. And when I sat down, this guy looked at all my paperwork. He looked at all the blood work, all my symptoms, and he looked at me in the eyes and he said, Mike, I'm telling you right now, you have Lyme disease. You probably have an issue with Candida, and you have some type of mercury, possibly mercury poisoning, some type of heavy metal issues going on. And at the time, I didn't know what this was. This was all foreign to me. Mm. And, you know, when he told me that, it gave me hope, because finally somebody believes that there's something wrong with me and they can possibly help. And the first thing he says, we're going to send your blood work to Igenics. And I said, I actually just sent my blood work to Igenics. So it worked out perfectly. Yeah. And he said, so right now, while we wait for those results, we're going to tailor your diet. We are going to start getting some just supplementation going, you know, regular vitamins and stuff for the immune system. And that's what I did. And within about 2 weeks, I got the results back. The doc called me and he said, Mike, you are positive for Lyme disease. Mm-hmm. And, you know, finally, you know, it was about now we're in 2019, the beginning of 2019. So it's been about a year. I have no answers. And that day I was in my house. I was sick. I was laying down. My phone went off. And his name is Dr. Kochi. Dr. Kochi calls me and he says, Mike, he says, I have good news for you. He said, you have Lyme disease. And, you know, you would think that it's bad news, but when you're dealing with a mystery illness that you can't, you know, that doctors can't figure out, and you finally have an answer, it was so relieving, and it gave me hope. Yeah. And what he told me, he said that you have it so bad that I want to send you to a doctor in Jackson, New Jersey, who treats it with antibiotics and natural medicine. Yep. And he made a emergency appointment for me. I couldn't get in there for about a week or two. And it got to the point, I got so sick that I literally could not get out of my bed. I had a fever. I was clammy. I was pale and gray. Could barely breathe. It got to the point I could barely speak, because the Lyme disease got into my nervous system and it was attacking my vagus nerve, and it was just wreaking havoc. And I actually was able to get into the doctor earlier because of how bad I got. And that day was, you know, when I look back at it, my wife and my mother literally had to carry me out the house. I live on the 3rd floor of an apartment building, and I could not make it out the door. And, you know, I was so sick that they literally had to carry me down the stairs into the car and bring me to the doctor. There was no way that I would have been able to make that trip alone. And that's when I started treating my Lyme disease with, you know, the regular American way, which was antibiotics. And I honestly got more sick. And this doctor doesn't only treat with antibiotics. She also treats with herbs and natural medicine. And she does a form of muscle testing as well to see which vitamins are going to work, which antibiotic is going to work for you, and depending on how your body responds. And I just wasn't getting better. I was getting more sick. I was working with her for like maybe about 3 or 4 months. She diagnosed me with late stage chronic neurological Lyme disease. And she also diagnosed me with a couple of co-infections. So Lyme disease doesn't come by itself. It brings other tick-borne illness along with it. So she diagnosed me with babesia, which is similar to malaria, which is why I had such severe shortness of breath. She diagnosed me with mycoplasma, which is a type of fungal viral thing, cytomegalovirus, and also Candida. I had a huge Candida outbreak, and it got so bad that my tongue was covered in white. I was having anal itching, which is a sign of also Candida, and I had a white rash down in my my private area.
Yeah.
And I was working with her for about 4 months or so, and it just wasn't working. But one of the good things that I got out of this doctor was I learned about the natural route. Mm-hmm. You know, because she was also open to natural medicine. She used natural medicine, and so I'm thankful for that, for meeting her, because it opened my mind to natural medicine.
Yeah, Mike. Before we move forward, can you tell us a little bit about? You said there's many different forms of Lyme. Can you just tell us? Okay, so what is Lyme from a general sense, and then how can it be differentiated? Amongst the different variants.
Sure. So Lyme in a general sense is a spirochete. And it's shaped like a corkscrew. It's a living organism. And what happens is this living organism of Lyme, which is called Borrelia burgdorferi, which is named after the doctor who originally found this spirochete, right? So Lyme disease in its general sense is a spirochete, Borrelia burgdorferi. It's carried through ticks, right? So if you live in an area that's heavily populated with woods and deers, most likely you're going to be exposed at some point to Lyme disease through a tick, which further research now says that it's any insect that bites. So it's not just ticks.
Yeah, but is it like all ticks have this thing, or in that area, or some of them have it?
No, yeah. So not every single tick has necessarily Lyme disease, but from my research and the doctors that I learned from, they're saying that a majority of Lyme of ticks carry it. And again, it's not just ticks at this point. It's it's spiders, it's mosquitoes. Any insect that bites can transmit the spirochete over to a human. And what happens is that spirochete also comes with other living organisms. And, like I said, the babesia, the mycoplasma, and the list goes on. So it doesn't come alone, right? So you'll be infected with the spirochete that is that Lyme is after, and along with other what they call co-infections. So that's Lyme in its general sense. But what I'm learning now from the doctors I'm under is that Lyme disease is just a term that they use to categorize, to put all these symptoms in a category. Mm-hmm. And from my research and what a lot of doctors who I follow are saying, that MS, lupus, Lou Gehrig's disease, that this is actually really Lyme disease. And what happens is you have these patients, they're going to doctors, they have a list of mystery symptoms. The doctor can't figure it out. He's like, you must have MS, or you must have lupus, or you must have, so-and-so. And, so from what I'm learning in my research, they're saying that Lyme disease, and again, Lyme disease as a whole, right? Not just the Borrelia spirochete, but also the co-infections, right? They come and they infect the person, right? And then if a person has a horrible diet, if a person is stressed out, had some type of emotional trauma happening around that time, and is not a healthy person, what happens is these organisms just wreak havoc. They weaken your immune system, and they literally take over your body. And then when they take over your body, now that your immune system is shot, now you have issues with Candida, right? You'll have Candida outbreaks. You'll have issues with heavy metal toxicity, right? Because now your immune system is shot. Mm. So you might have been a healthy person all your life, and then all of a sudden you get bit by an insect that transmitted Lyme disease over to you, and you become the perfect storm for this stuff to take over, and then you're a completely different person. And it's crazy And some people say that this is a conspiracy, but I don't believe it is, because I did my homework and I researched. But they're saying that Lyme disease was actually started as a bioweapon.
Mm-hmm.
And from my research, they're saying, you know, Lyme disease started in Lyme, Connecticut. Lyme, Connecticut is right across the water from a U.S. military infectious disease institute. And what they're saying is that whatever they were working on there.
What is it called? Plum Island or something like that?
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Plum Island. So, you know, there's a lot of researchers that they're at the point, and they're saying that it's not that this is not even in question no more, that there's actually been paperwork and reports on this stuff, that's what happened. And, you know, obviously, you know, that's not going to be disclosed. So, yeah, you know, it's really, when you think about it, it's very sinister,
mm-hmm.
you know, and, you know, from my research and the people I was learning from, they said that, you know, their plan was during the Cuban Missile Crisis with the United States, that their plan was to fly over Cuba and drop these infected ticks, right, into their crops. And now what happens is these people start getting infected with Lyme disease. They get sick. They get to the point how I was probably, you know, bedridden. And now you need a whole family to rally around you to kind of get you going. And their plan was to weaken the population so that if something was to happen and we were to go to war, they can easily invade and they wouldn't have as much resistance. So, you know, again, some people say,
no, it seems like seems like history is repeating itself. You know, I know another virus that escaped the lab.
Oh yeah. And you know, the crazy thing is, brother, is that you know, a lot of people who I speak to about this, I got to be careful, because some people look at me like I'm crazy, and I'm like, I'm not making this stuff up. You know, I learned this the hard way. You know, I got sick, and American medicine did not work for me, and I became such an advocate for myself, and I said, I want my life back, and there has to be alternatives. And me as a Christian, a really big factor that really made me want to research was, when you study the scriptures, the Bible, God has so much to speak about health, right? To the point that God gave the Jewish nation dietary laws. And when you study those dietary laws, it makes sense. You know, a perfect example, the Jewish people, they can't eat pigs, right? Also Muslims. I found out that pigs are some of the most, one of the animals that carry the most highest population of parasitic infections, right? So me being a Christian, my faith and my belief in the scriptures and studying what God had to say in his word about health, I'm like, holy smokes. I'm like, I literally have answers in a book that I've been reading, and I really didn't take the time out to see, you know, what does this book have to say about my health and about natural healing. But yeah, not to go on a tangent, but Lyme disease and you know, again, in general, is a spirochete. These spirochetes are very intelligent, you know, to the point that they literally can resist antibiotics. They'll if someone's taking antibiotics and after a while, these spirochetes learn how to dodge it, and it gets to the point that they're literally burrowing in your muscles and your tissues. The spirochete loves collagen, right? So that's why a lot of people end up having joint pain. You know, that's why, because they love collagen. They feed off that. But yeah, and again, it wreaks havoc, and it brings these other infections. It weakens your immune system, and now you're just a perfect storm for this stuff to take over.
Yeah. So Mike, how did, can you tell us a little bit of what IGeneX does comparatively to the other tests? Because I think you got tested a few times prior.
Yeah.
Why did those things not show anything? And then what is differentiating between what IGeneX does? And obviously there's many strains of it, so maybe one strain would show up if you had that, but not the other. Yeah.
So from my research and what I know about IGeneX, their testing is more thorough. They don't only use they have a number of different testing procedures that they put your blood through. I don't know every single one in detail, but unlike the regular Western blot test that they're just running one panel, IGeneX doesn't just run one panel of testing. they're actually taking their time. They're putting it through different exams. They're really inspecting the blood, and they're able to, with their testing procedures and methods, they're able to give a more thorough diagnosis by looking at what they're seeing, and also the positive bands. But they also don't just use their testing; they also use their testing along with the patient's symptoms. So if the person's symptoms are lining up with what they believe they're seeing, they're like, this is Lyme disease. And that's kind of what separates them, because a person can go to a regular Lyme literate doctor and have all the symptoms, but the test is negative and the doctor would throw you out the door, right? One doctor of natural medicine that I spoke to, he said, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck, right? And that's kind of how you have to look at people with Lyme. It's like, if you've had all these blood tests done, they all came out negative, doctors can't find out what's going on, you literally have all the symptoms of Lyme disease, most likely it's going to be Lyme disease.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very interesting. And I have to really applaud you for the journey that you're on, because, going to, you said like 30 doctors and all of them telling you no, a few of them telling you you're going crazy. I mean,
yeah,
I understand how stressful that could be. And, there's a lot of compassionate, awesome, amazing doctors out there. My parents were doctors. My sister's a doctor. But there's also a lot that only know a certain field of whatever study that they did. And, it's unfortunate to have this kind of complex where they think, okay, it's my way or nothing. And then telling you you're the crazy one when they just don't have the knowledge. It's really sad, because it happens a lot. I think we should highlight that nobody's going to have more invested. No one's going to be more invested in your own health than you. So you can't listen to a doctor that's going to give you bad news, because there's all these people out there, millions of people that have spontaneous healings from things that they were given a death sentence from. So it's so important to continue the journey, because the journey's not over until you say it's over, and you got to keep going and going and going. And then you started like going to one person, you unlocked one code, got to another person, unlocked another one, even though not one of those persons, cured you, you kept getting little bits of information. It led you to get the right testing, then going to the right chiropractor, and then the right doctor after that. So yeah, let's continue with that. So after you went to the Chinese herbal doctor, it was helping you a little bit, but you still needed a little bit more help. So tell us a little bit about how things played out from there.
Yeah. So, again, I worked with that doctor who was providing me antibiotics. She saw I wasn't getting better, so she sent me to a doctor in Staten Island, New York. And
that's where I grew up.
Oh yeah, that's funny. Staten Island has supposedly a high population of Lyme disease and stuff.
Yeah, 100%.
But a huge deer population, by the way. So a lot of deer over there. Yeah. So she recommended a doctor in Staten Island. She wanted to get me on IV antibiotics. So that was the plan. I went to this doctor. He said, first, I want to megadose you with amoxicillin. He was giving me over 3,000 milligrams a day of amoxicillin. I got super, super sick. I ended up at the hospital in Staten Island. I had to stay overnight. They were running a whole bunch of tests on me. And it wasn't working. I was following his instructions. I was getting sick. And I was fortunate enough that this doctor said to me, you know what, Mike? He said, I think before I give you IV, I want you to go see a friend of mine. He's in New York City and he treats Lyme disease with herbs. And this is the first time I hear a regular traditional medical doctor tell me to go see a natural medicine doctor.
Yeah.
And
it's very, very rare. Very rare.
Oh yeah, super rare. So when he told me that, I was pretty shocked, and I said, let's do it. And his friend was Dr. Zhang, and Dr. Zhang has a clinic in Manhattan. They're called the Zhang Clinic. And this doctor, they treat Lyme disease at his clinic with herbal medicine. And so right when he told me to go see Dr. Zhang, this is right when COVID started happening. So, now COVID started breaking out. This was like the beginning of 2020, right? It was when COVID started, like March, around that time. So I couldn't physically go see Dr. Zhang. So I called and they did a phone consultation. And Dr. Zhang was booked. So I worked with his another practitioner. Her name was Phyllis. And we did a phone consultation, and she said, you know, listening to your symptoms, you definitely have Lyme disease. You probably most likely have a number of co-infections, other viral infections. She said, Mike, our treatment is strong enough in itself that we do not need to use antibiotics. And she said, I do ask you one thing. As we start treatment, we're gonna send you our book. He has a book, Dr. Zhang, that he wrote on Lyme disease and healing the body. It's about $10 on Amazon. And they said, I want you to read this. Her words was, you need to read it. And I said, I will. And I read the book, and I learned so much about what herbal medicine does to your body in regards to bringing healing, how it attacked the Lyme disease, how antibiotics literally ruins your body. So it was awesome, you know. So at the same time they were treating me, I was also being educated on their protocol and why it works and why people are getting their life back. So I started their treatment. It was 100% herbs. I was doing their treatment for about 4 or 5 months. For the first time, I started seeing progress. It wasn't major progress, but I started getting my voice back. I wasn't able to speak before. I was literally to the point where I had to text everything out because I literally had no voice because of how bad it got in my nervous system.
Yeah. So you were saying when we spoke prior to this conversation, you said that the Lyme attacks you, it attacked you particularly in the nervous system. So that was affecting your voice.
Yep. Correct. And that doesn't happen with everybody. You know, some people, it might not ever get into their nervous system. In my case, unfortunately, it did. And because your nervous system controls a lot of different functions, that's why I was getting my heart rate would actually go up and down. Sometimes it would be as low as 40 beats per minute, then it would go up to like 120, just randomly. You know, I could just be sitting down and my heart rate can shoot up to like 120, 130, and you know, it would scare me, to be honest with you. And from what they told me is because your nervous system controls all these different functions. And now what happens is when the Lyme, you know, gets into your nervous system, it just kind of starts throwing everything off. Your nerves actually become inflamed, right? And you start experiencing these different issues. And in my specific situation, I was having issues with my heart. I was having issues with my voice. I lost my voice. My nerves were inflamed. So I would say about 3 or 4 months, I was working with the Zhang clinic. And for the first time, I started actually seeing progress. But then I started experiencing another problem. As I was treating myself, I started becoming sensitive to cell phones. You know, like it got to the point that if I grab my cell phone, my symptoms would start to flare up. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, what's this now? And literally, if I would hold a cell phone next to me, or if my wife would be on her MacBook next to me, my symptoms would flare up and I literally would feel like my body was burning, right? Like something was like lighting me on fire. And I'm like, okay, what is this? I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So I did my own research, and from what I found, I was experiencing EMF sensitivity, which is electromagnetic fields. Your cell phone, MacBooks, we're exposed to EMFs all around us.
Yeah. And I think around that time, right at the start of COVID, and, you know, they started putting up all these 5G towers. So radiation was, you know, like if you look at the spikes, they're skyrocketing that time.
Yeah. And you know what? That's a good point that you bring that up, because when that happened, I tell you, I became so sensitive with my body that if somebody was you know, downstairs below me using a MacBook or a computer, I can literally feel it. And around that time when COVID started, I remember I just felt extra sensitive. And you're absolutely correct. That's when they started putting up a whole bunch of 5G towers all around. And so that definitely had an impact in regards to me becoming more sensitive. So when I started experiencing this, I let the Zhang clinic know, and they were a little familiar with EMF, but they really weren't experts in it. And her words to me was just to keep attacking the Lyme. And, you know, so I kept doing research, and I'm like, I need to deal with this because it's becoming a problem. It was affecting me. Everybody has cell phones. Like I literally couldn't visit, or people couldn't visit without putting their phones in airplane mode or turning it off to cut off all service. So I was part of a Lyme community on Facebook, and I'm researching doctors, and I run across a doctor in like upstate New York in Spring Valley that had like 5 stars. People were recommending him. So I'm looking at the reviews. He had awesome reviews, but there was one negative review. And I'm a little weird. I like to see what the negative is.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, okay, what are the like, all right, that's cool. He's good, but what is the negative stuff? So that negative review, all they said was, check out Dr. Grenier. He's the real deal. And I said, Dr. Grenier. I said, let me look him up. And I typed in Dr. Louis Grenier, New York City. And it just so happened that Dr. Grenier uses a technique that I discovered in my research called NRT, Nutritional Muscle Response Testing. And I said, this is awesome. Like, I was learning a lot from a guy he's a pretty well-known YouTuber who recovered from Lyme disease. His name is Siren Kenny. And he has awesome information in regards to healing your body. And he recommended getting one of these doctors on board who do muscle testing.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's also known as kinesiology as well, right?
Yes,
like yeah.
Correct. Yeah. One of the big doctors who practice it, Dr. Dietrich Klinghart, from the Klinghart Institute, well-known doctor. He has awesome success with people recovering from Lyme. So I said, you know what? I'm going to call this doc. You know, I really believe that God like kind of brought this to me because I literally been researching this stuff. And I just felt in my spirit that the Zen clinic, it was working to a certain extent, but I really believed that something was missing. So I called Dr. Grenier. He did a phone consultation and he said, you know what? I believe that you're somebody I can help. He's the type of doctor, he's not going to waste your time. He's not going to take your money. He's not about that. If he can't help you, he'll tell you straight up, look, unfortunately, I can't help you. And he told me that he believes that he can help me. So I made an appointment. My first appointment was literally right in the middle of the pandemic when everything was shut down. And literally I drove into New York City and it was like a ghost town. My wife and my brother-in-law brought me in. I was so bad, they literally rolled me in a wheelchair. I mean, I was like slumped over. I was pale. I could barely speak. And Dr. Grenier, you know, him and my wife got me on the bed. They laid me down, he went over my symptoms, and he started the muscle testing. And after the muscle testing, he told me everything he found, what's going on. And when I tell you that this procedure is so accurate, my personal opinion, I believe it's more accurate than blood work. Like, you know, muscle testing is literally using your body to let the doctor know, you know, how your body's responding to what's being placed on it. You know, he uses homeopathic vials and he places it on your stomach. You know, you're laying flat. My left arm is raised up and I'm pushing against his resistance while these homeopathic vials are on my body. And he's touching different acupuncture points on my body while I'm pushing against his resistance while the vial is on my stomach. And it's showing him what's going on. And he diagnosed, he said, oh yeah, he said, you know, Lyme disease is kind of a general term. It's not only the spirochete, but all these other, you know, friends it brings along with it. And he said you have babesia, you have cytomegalovirus, you have, you're sensitive to radiation and EMF, you have heavy metal toxicity, you have a little bit of mold going on. And he said, listen, he said, you have parasites. He said, I can help you. But he told me, he said, Mike, I need you 100% in your mind. He said, this is not going to be easy. It's going to be super tough. And I'm going to need you to push through. And, you know, I was at the point I was willing to do whatever, to the point that I told myself, even if I'm going to die, I'm going to fight to get my life back. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a little extreme, but that's my mindset at that point. And, you know, and that was the beginning of what literally changed my life. And, you know, those first 5 months of doing his protocol and, you know, his approach, he doesn't attack everything at once. depending on how the muscle testing goes, he sees what's causing the major problems, you know, and then he kind of targets what would be what makes the most sense depending on what he found. Right. So we first did energy and detoxing. We then pulled out mold. We then killed parasites. After the parasites, we went into heavy metals, which I'm still doing. And, you know, while we're doing all this stuff, he's still attacking the babesia, the viral infections, the spirochete from the Lyme. And his words to me was, my treatment goes deep enough to remove the infection, right? And along with that, they tailored a whole diet plan out for me. And, you know, that's one thing, you know, people also need to understand is that your diet is very crucial in regards to healing from any chronic illness.
It's everything.
You know,
it's everything.
Man,
That and gut health, right? And the elimination, detoxification.
Super. And, you know, if, you know, there's an old saying, you are what you eat, you know, and if you're eating bad, it doesn't matter if you're taking supplementation and you're doing, you know, you're following your doctor's instructions, but if your eating is horrible, you're not going to see results. You know, I know people who, you know, they have really good doctors in natural medicine, but then, you know, they're not following their doctor's instructions and they're eating horrible. They're eating, you know, they're going to have a Burger King, and I'm like, you're not going to see results, man. You know, and so I made sure that I followed the diet plan 100%. It wasn't easy, but I told myself I want my life back. And, you know, throughout this process, I was seeing him in the beginning every 2 weeks because of how sick I was. And every 2 weeks, he was muscle testing me. He told me as I get better, my visits will become more spread out. And I'm going to tell you the first 4 to 5 months were the most tough for me. What happens is when you start detoxing and killing these organisms and removing this garbage from your body goes through what they call Herxheimer's reaction or die-off, and your symptoms get worse before you start to heal. Yeah. And I tell you right now, it got so bad. I had moments where I thought I was going to die. Yeah. Like
it's all the parasites. It's all the parasites, the mold, the fungus, all them things being released back into the bloodstream. So yeah, you're gonna see all that that inflammation. Real quick question. So when you said that he was killing mold, he was killing fungus, what did you mean by that? Like, how was it done? Was it over time through the diet, or was there another method that he used?
Yeah. So number one, diet, right? There's certain foods that either carry mold and funguses, like like peanut butter. You know, peanut butter sitting inside of a jar, believe it or not, has a high content. You know, if you were to take it and put it under a microscope of different mold or funguses, right? Even like the jellies and stuff like that. So my diet, he tailored it where it wasn't feeding viruses. It wasn't, I was on foods that for the most part are very rare to have mold. Everything had to be organic. I had to inspect my fruit. So the diet, number one, right? And number two, when he was removing molds, he had me on specific herbs that literally pull mold out of your body. Like one of the herbs I was using was olive leaf. Olive leaf was super strong in regards to taking mold out of my body. And when I went through that, I had some crazy symptoms. I remember becoming lethargic and feeling like I was kind of like in a dreamlike state. Because again, all of this stuff, it's like it overwhelms your system. But he also taught me different lymphatic drainage techniques to kind of get my lymph system going, to get this stuff out. So in regards to like taking mold out, it was using herbs, my diet. When he was killing parasites, that was super, super tough. Like, you have to understand these organisms are living and they don't want to die, number one. And when they do die, like you said, they let off these toxins in your body and they're literally poisoning you. So, it was very crucial that I had to try my best to do different lymphatic massages, Epsom salt baths in warm water. And you know what's crazy? I would really experience die-off. I would get worse in the evening when the sun went down. And from what I learned, when the sun goes down, your immune system is weaker. So, it was crazy, man, how sensitive I was becoming, and all this stuff made sense, but I just really had to push through those moments. And what really helped me too, believe it or not, was essential oils. right? My wife would literally wake up, I would experience die off like around 12 midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, which by the way, is a big sign of parasites dying off. Or even if somebody has issues waking up around that time, it's usually parasitical. Like if there's a full moon out, for some reason, a full moon gets the parasites going inside somebody. It's crazy. But yeah, man, it's crazy. And hear this, man. Researchers said that most homicides, like most murders and stuff, happen around like 12 midnight, around that time. And they're saying that they're linking a lot of like people who go like mad, they're linking it to having parasitical infections, because they're saying that this stuff literally affects your mental health.
Yeah, that's why they call them lunatics, right? Because Luna
Yes.
is the moon.
Correct.
Yeah, this has been known for a long time.
Yeah. So, I mean, and what's crazy, when if somebody was to tell me this years ago, I would be like, yeah, okay. Yeah, you're crazy.
Crazy, right?
And, it wasn't, if it wasn't for me going through all this and learning, like, this is truth, man. There's something inside of you that resonates when you hear truth. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's what was being presented to me. And I was doing my research, I was doing my homework, and I said, what my doctor and these doctors are telling me is truth. So yeah, man, what would help me during those die-off moments? And just to give an example of what it feels like when you're experiencing die-off, you have your symptoms are like 10 times more, right? Mm-hmm. You have like this overwhelming feeling of fear of like something's gonna happen to you. You feel like you're gonna die. I would get really clammy. I would feel like I was gonna pass out. My heart rate would shoot up. I would become super pale. My veins were all out. I would literally be on the floor, like how bad it got. And what my wife would do, I was so terrified when I was going through it that I would literally like crawl to the room and hit the door to wake my wife up so she can hear that something was wrong with me. And she would come and she would literally hold me. She'll pray over me, and she would take essential oils and start giving me a massage, and it actually started getting my lymph system going. And then I would have a bowel movement, and I would feel amazing after that, which was an indicator that these toxins are trying to, get out. Mm-hmm. So super important while you're going through this, to have your drainage system going, because like you said, these toxins, if different organisms are dying and mold is being taken out and metals, it needs somewhere to be eliminated. Yeah. So I was doing different, massages, on my chest, under my armpits, just trying to push myself to take little brief walks. And again, just pushing through, man, because it's also very spiritual and mental, the battle. As real as the physical is, like I was telling Ashish, if you don't deal with the mental part of it, in my opinion, you probably won't see success in the physical part. Yeah. And then also belief, right? Like you never gave up hope that it was going to happen. And, having such a lovely wife that's there to support you and telling you every single day, like, hey, we're going to get through this. We're going to get through this. So belief from others and also belief in yourself really, really goes a long way. Yeah, definitely. It's, like you said, it goes hand in hand, I was telling Ashish, it got to a point that when I first got sick, I was speaking death over myself. I was telling myself, I'm going to die. I need to start preparing a will for my wife and kids. I'm not going to make it through this. And, it wasn't until I really took the time through my suffering and my sickness to really study the scriptures as a Christian. And there was one specific verse that spoke to me, and it said that there is death and life in the power of your tongue, right? And when I really started to study that and understand it, I started to understand that if I'm speaking death over my situation and I'm not believing that I'm going to get well and I'm going to stay sick and I'm feeding that, that's what's going to happen, right? And I got to a point that depending on how I felt, it didn't matter how I felt, right? Even though I felt sick and I felt like I wasn't going to get well, I still told myself that I'm going to get well, that God has plans for me, that one day I'm going to be sharing my testimony. I had a picture of how I was right before I got sick when I landed a really good job. It was my work ID. And I literally had that hanging up, and I would look at that and I would tell myself, I'm going to be like that one day again. I'm going to be, able to go to work again. And what I started doing, I started writing down different Bible verses that had to speak about life. And I put them around my house. And literally I would wake up in the middle of the night. I would be experiencing die-off. And I would be on the floor and I would be looking at those Bible scriptures and just praying them over my life. And it didn't matter what my situation looked like. It was a decision I made to not believe, my feelings, but to believe what God's word had to say about my situation. And I'll tell you one thing, when I started doing that, when I look back at it, I had such, it sent me like to the next level in my healing, right? When I started dealing with the spiritual, right? Because at first I was kind of ignoring it. I was, again, I've been a Christian for about 10 years. I would consider myself a devout Christian. I don't just profess it. I actually live it out. Right. But I never really studied the scriptures to see what was it that God's word had to say about healing, right? About your diet, right? About your mental health, right? And it wasn't until I started applying that and I stopped focusing so much on me being sick, and I changed my focus and I started focusing on what the word of God had to say. And I started believing it and praying it over my life. It wasn't until I did that, believe it or not, I saw a huge break in regards to what my, seeing success in my healing journey.
Yeah. You can't go anywhere physically without having that intention, right? So if you are focusing on God and what it actually means to you, and the like the omnipresence and the healing and the love and all of that, then you're putting your mind, your body, your spirit in the right frequency to allow for the healing. So Mike, what does God mean to you?
Yeah. So to me, for my, again, my belief as a Christian, to me, God is everything, right? God is, God is the creator of the universe, right? I personally study the Bible. I study the scriptures, and I believe that to be God's word and God's letter in regards to letting us know why we are here on earth. Why were we made? What's the point of life, right? So to me, God, again, is the creator, right? He created us, right? He has a plan for our lives, right? But God also gives us free will, right? So we make the decision if, are we going to believe in God? Or are we not going to believe in God, right? I'm going to say something that somebody once told me. They said, God is a gentleman, right? God is not going to force himself on anybody, right? God wants a relationship with his people, but he's not going to force it, right? So again, to me, God is the creator of the universe, right? God is my maker. He made me. God wants a relationship with me, right? And going through my sickness and my time of suffering, I can honestly say, brother, that my relationship with God literally got forged in the fire, right? It was through the fire and through the forging that I can say that my faith really got tested, and my relationship with God grew. I look back at it now and I'm just so thankful for going through those dark moments, because I didn't realize at the time, but God was allowing me to go through that. And there was lessons for me to be taught during that. One of the lessons I learned was how to forgive, right? God taught me how to forgive people through my sickness. I was holding on to so much unforgiveness and so much resentment in regards to people who hurt me in the past. And I learned that I had to let go of that. And when I let go of those things, I saw more and more healing taking place in my body.
Yeah, so beautiful, bro. So I actually had an experience with ayahuasca a couple of years ago. It's a psychedelic from the Peruvian jungle, and I actually came into contact with Jesus, and he told me one very important thing. And what he said was, the only lesson I want to teach humanity and to teach you is, in order to reach enlightenment, you have to love, you have to have peace, and you have to forgive. And forgiveness, without that, you can't ascend, because, a lot of times when we get sicknesses, it's because we're holding that energetic, the emotional trauma inside of a place in our body. Then it starts manifesting when things get out of whack. And we all have different stress levels. And when our stress level is hit to the max, that's when boom, the disease can trigger inside the body. So really, really important to forgive. And after that experience, I went on like a 6-month journey of just like forgiving people and apologizing for any wrongdoings that I did to some people. And I tell you, I never felt so free after that, having those reconciling conversations. And I think if the person that you need to forgive, they're no longer here, or if you need to apologize, they're no longer here, or it's just not a way that you can communicate with them, then write a letter to them and don't send it. But at least you put your intention out there and let it out in the universe.
Yeah, no, yeah. And, you hit it right on the nail, with the love and the forgiveness, from me studying the scriptures, right? One of the things that God says is, to love the Lord God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And, that's number one. And a second thing in the Bible, it speaks about the power of forgiveness, right? To the point that there's certain scriptures that say, not forgiving is like, it's like it allows your bones to get rotten and, and sickness to kind of come on. I forgot the exact words, but it's along those lines. And, it's just so crazy, when I was going through that stuff, when I was studying the scriptures, and I said, like, this is crazy. Like, this actually is telling me what the doctors are saying, right? The scriptures talk about fasting, right? And now you have doctors, or, at least, doctors sharing the benefits of fasting, right? And I'm like, man, it's crazy, because this book that was written years ago literally tells us the benefits of fasting. It tells us the benefits of following certain dietary laws. It tells us the power of, when you choose to love. It teaches us about forgiving, right? And when you literally take God's word and you apply it to your life and to every situation that you're going through, you can literally see how you can see God's work working in your life, right? Yeah. So something I want to share with you, and this might sound crazy, hopefully not, but when I was sick, there was a lot of people from our church that was praying for me and believing God for me and believing that I was going to get well. Because I had moments, if I was to be honest, there was moments where I felt so discouraged and I thought that I wasn't going to get my life back, right? But I have my wife by my side saying, no, you're going to get well again, right? I'm believing God for you. I'm praying over you, right? And there was one church service that these people were so serious about getting me there. I didn't want to go. I'm like, I don't want to go. I'm sick. Anyway. So I went to the church service and I'm sitting down and they have this evangelist from the Bronx. And, he came and he's preaching, but before he preached, they had someone singing and the person singing. And I don't know, I just became emotional, man. Like I just started crying and I just felt like this heaviness come over me. And it got to the point that I just started sobbing, and it kind of scared me. I'm like, what's going on? Like, why do I feel so emotional right now? And I kind of walked out the sanctuary, is what you call the part of the church where you go to pray and stuff. I walked out of the sanctuary and I didn't want to go back in because I literally felt the power of God moving in that church, to the point that as the guy was singing, right? The Bible speaks about the power of worship, right? When people sing unto God and worship God, how it literally breaks bondages over people's lives, right? It breaks bondages, it breaks oppression over people's lives, depression. And I kind of ran out of the sanctuary because it literally scared me, like what I was experiencing. I'm like, what the heck is this? I'm like, I read about it in the Bible, but I personally never experienced it. And I've always been a skeptic by nature. I'm like, okay, I don't know, even though the Bible says this, I got to see it for myself to really, really believe it. And that night, man, they ended up, I didn't want to go back inside, right? And I literally felt, again, the power of God moving. And it was so the Bible speaks about the glory of God coming down, right? And when the glory of God comes down, people are healed, people are set free from things, right? And I tell you not, bro, it felt like there was literally like a fog inside the sanctuary, to the point that it scared the heck out of me. I didn't want to go back into the sanctuary. And whenever somebody would come to check for me, they'll open the door, and I literally felt that like the fog coming in to the door. I'm telling you, bro, it was like, and this is real, man. And again, I'm somebody who's a skeptic by nature, and I'm like, what the heck is going on, man? Like, it scared me, but I knew that it was the power of God, but it also I had a fear, like, oh my gosh, like this is real. So these three guys come and they're like, they say, Mike, you're gonna get prayed for, and we're gonna believe that God is gonna move in your life, and you're gonna be healed from this. And they literally carried me like a baby. They picked me up and they pulled me into the church, and I'm over here pushing it, like I'm pushing against the wall. I don't want to go in. And they're like, they said, Mike, we're believing God for you. And they said, we're going to have the same fate that the paralytic had in the Bible. There was a story of a paralytic who he was paralyzed all his life, and God healed him because of his faith. They said, we're going to believe God for you. And they pulled me in, and this evangelist, he's walking, he's praying for people, and he comes to me and he looks at me, and he's praying, and he says that whatever is inside of me right now, that he curses it in the name of Jesus, and that he believes that I'm going to be healed and set free, and that God's going to use me to share my testimony and to do mighty work for him. And I kid you not, bro, as he's speaking and prayed over me, the guy didn't even touch me. I literally flew back and fell into my chair. And it literally was such an experience, man, that it literally changed my life, man. Like, I'm like, what I'm reading in the Bible is real. Like, this is serious, man. Like, when God moves, I always tell people, you have to understand, God is supernatural. So when God moves in the natural, there has to be, supernatural things taking place. Mm-hmm. Right. And something crazy, man, when these Christians would lay their hands on me and pray over me, it's crazy. I started having die-off. So the same symptoms that I would have when this stuff was coming out of my body and these viruses were dying, I would literally experience it when these Christians were coming next to me and laying their hands on me and praying for me. I would start having die-off. And it just showed how real the spiritual is in regards to sickness and everything. And that's something that I really haven't told people. Like, you're probably one of the first people I tell besides my wife, because I don't want to freak people out, but again, from my personal beliefs, it just shows how real the Bible is and how true God's word is in regards to when we apply it to our situations. And again, I just started having so much breakthroughs when I really started believing God at his word and applying it to my life. And, I would wake up in the morning, bro, and I would start my day off by thanking God. Lord, thank you for another day. Lord, thank you for my wife. Lord, thank you for my children. And, changing your mindset, right? And again, not focusing on the sickness, not focusing on the negative, but focusing on what has God blessed me with.
Yeah, gratitude.
And it was just such a huge factor, man. And I don't mean to go off on a different story, but yeah, man. And I continued with Dr. Grenier. Yeah. And the first 5 months were the most difficult. And after 5 months, I kind of started getting more into it was getting easier. And he told me that was going to happen. He said, after 5 months, it'll probably get easier for you. And, and again, not saying it was super easy, but for the most part, the hard stuff was done. And, he kept on changing the protocol, kept me on a strict diet. And fast forward now, I've been with Dr. Grenier for over about a year and 2 months. I see him every 8 weeks. I'm still on the protocol. I'm on my diet. I'm able now to add a little bit more things that I wasn't able to before. But he tells me people they're not fully out of the woodworks for about 2 years of consistent treatment. And then even after that, he recommends staying on some herbs and obviously following a strict diet, and just taking care of yourself, So this year I was finally able to go back to work full time. I work in New York City, which is awesome because, I went from bedridden to working in New York City. It's one of the biggest markets in the world. Yeah. I work out almost every day. I go for bike rides. Me and my family, we join jujitsu. So, just to look at where God has taken me from, from being sick, from being bedridden, from losing my finances, from losing friendships, to now, God restoring everything and bringing me out of that storm. And I'm just so grateful, man, and now I appreciate life, right? I appreciate the little things. if I get out of work early, I make sure I go pick up my daughters and I bring them for a walk. And, it's just, these are things, bro, that we take for granted. And it's not until we're hit with the reality that life is not promised to us. Neither is our health, right? And it took me being faced with that stuff to say, wow, I didn't realize how ungrateful I was for these things all my life. And it took sickness and suffering and those dark moments to really, for me to see that, life is precious, man. Mm-hmm. Back in 2015, 2016, my stepfather, he got killed in a tragic accident, right? And I look back at that as well, man. And I'm like, you just don't know when your time is, right? And just how important it is, again, to touch up on the spiritual stuff, right? To appreciate and embrace those relationships that God has put in your life, right? And to appreciate the little things, man. Now if I can't find parking in front of my house, I don't mind parking 3-4 blocks away, because there was a point in my life where I wasn't able to walk. You know what I mean? I don't mind washing dishes now, because there was a point in my life where I couldn't wash dishes. You know what I mean? So it's the little things that if we really look at, those little things that we do that are so repetitive every day. And if we really learn how to embrace those things and to say, Lord, thank you, thank you that I'm able to do these things, because I wish that nobody would have to go through what I went through. But sometimes, that's how God opens your eyes, and, he allows these things to happen. And I could tell you right now, bro, what I'm going into a new season of my life, right? There's a story in the Bible of a man named Job. And the Bible says that this guy was righteous. He lived holy. I mean, this guy was on point, and he had, a whole bunch of children, and, he was one of the wealthiest men on earth. And it said that God allowed Satan to touch it, to attack him with sickness. And to make a long story short, Job loses everything. He loses his finances. He loses his children. And it gets to the point that his wife says, do you still believe in God? She says, why don't you curse God and die? And Job says to her, don't speak like a foolish woman. He says, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord, right? And the ending of that story, right? Throughout Job's sickness and Job's time of suffering, he never stopped believing in the Lord, and he always gave thanks to God. And at the ending of that story, it says that God restored to Job everything that he had. He gave it to him like double. And it says that Job's latter days were better than his former. Mm-hmm. And that's where I'm going in right now. I'm going into a season where I'm saying, I'm just so grateful, man. And, you asked me, what does limitless, living limitless mean to me? Living limitless means that, now, again, I'm going to embrace life. I want to travel now. Mm-hmm. There's so many things that I didn't do because I let fear stop me. And now I'm saying, no, I want to live limitless. I want to travel. I want to experience the world. I want to experience different cultures, and these are things that I took for granted before. Right. And again, not to go so far off topic, but, and again, I just want to give hope to those who are suffering, to those who are dealing with sickness, that there is hope. Right. And there's alternatives out there. And, don't give up, keep fighting. If one doctor can't help you, God has another doctor for you. Right. It took me going through so many doctors to finally be, I was led to the doctor who was able to help me, and you got to fight. I wish I could say that, just sit back and let God do everything, but that's not how it is.
Definitely
you
not.
have to fight,
Absolutely not. One of my favorite things to say is make your worst day ever, create it into, make it to the best blessing, the best gift, the best opportunity of your life, because only in that darkness, that's how you can find your way out. Like you said, you have to walk through the fire. In order for you to reach out to Dr. Grenier while you're suffering from all this EMF, stuff, you had to pull out a laptop, look them up, have a call. So you have to go through the fire. And once you go through the fire, you're way stronger on the other side. And I really just, applaud your journey, and I'm so inspired by it. And I really hope that, a ton of people listen to this, because this is so powerful. And, you don't get to hear stories like this because everything on the news is oh, listen to the doctors, do this, do this, do this.
Oh yeah.
But there's so many beautiful stories like yours, and really you're such an inspiration. I really hope you're able to get that word out there. Mike, so why do you think you came here to Earth? Like, what did you want to experience?
Yeah. So my belief why I'm here on earth, I believe that God, right? The Bible says that God already had a plan for my life before I was even formed inside my mother's womb. So I believe that I have a purpose. I believe that again, based off my Christian beliefs, I believe that my job, or at least my duty, is not only to love people, to treat people with respect, to forgive, but to tell people about my faith, to share my faith, to share about the God I believe in the Bible, right? To share about Jesus Christ and what I believe is the reason for life. What I believe, how we should go about dealing, with different situations we find ourselves in, and so yeah. I mean, me personally, my reason for being here, I believe God has a plan for me. I believe God wants me to reach many people. And again, I believe that what I went through is going to be part of my story. I wouldn't think in a million years that I would be on a podcast sharing what I went through, and now to be able to do that, I'm saying, wow, like, God, this is part of the plan you have for my life, right? Because it's not only about me, it's about the other person who's sick. It's about that person who needs hope, right? And I think sometimes we get so caught up and we're so focused on me. And, sometimes we need to take a step back and say, you know what? It's actually not about me. It's about the other person. It's about, again, a God having a plan and God using this to reach other people. And that's what I believe my purpose is. Right now, I believe me getting Lyme disease was part of my purpose. It was part of God's plan, because now he's using me to share my story and to give others hope, to not give up and to keep looking up.
So beautiful, man. I really appreciate you coming on. Any final messages to the audience?
Yeah. Final messages, number one, do not lose hope, right? The minute you lose hope, the minute you start believing that you're not going to get well and you give into that stuff, that will eat you alive, right? Number one, don't lose hope, right? I was once sitting in the other side. I was once sitting in the sick person's shoes. And when I heard testimonies, it gave me so much hope. So, if you're listening to this, please don't lose hope. Keep fighting. You're going to find a doctor that's going to be able to help you. And, me personally, what really helped was praying, start dealing with the spiritual as well. Again, my personal belief, I was praying and asking God to give me strength to get through it, right? I was speaking life over myself. I was putting Bible verses throughout my house and praying those scriptures over my life. So, start seeking God, right? Ask God to show you if he's real, right? There's a scripture in the Bible that says, if you call on me, I will show you great and mighty things that you do not know, right? So my recommendation is, ask God why he's allowing you to go through this. Ask God if he's real, to make himself real to you, right? And then find out why God is allowing this and how God can use it to bless or benefit somebody else. And when you start doing that and stop focusing on yourself, you'll see how healing starts taking place, even in those what seems like little things, but are really big things, right? Number three is you need to learn how to put what's going to feed life into your body, right? And obviously spiritually, but also physically, right? Your diet's super important. Please eat well, right? If you want to recover, I know it's hard because as people, we get so emotional. We can become emotional eaters, right? That's how I was. I if I was sad or I was, upset, I would get a big thing of Haagen-Dazs and down it, but you're literally feeding death into your body.
Yeah, and that's right? Parasites. That's their favorite food. That's when you get emotional about certain things. The parasites get hungry and they're calling for, hey, give me sugar, give me chocolate, give me ice cream, give me pizza, give me fried food.
Yeah, so true. And that's something I learned, is that a lot of these cravings actually, like you said, come from parasites. It's not you craving these things, it's these parasites that want to be fed. But yeah, but I just want the listener who listens to this podcast to not give up. And, you know, I went through sickness, I went through suffering, and I'm out on the other end, right? And, you know, embrace what you're going through, you know, embrace it, and just, you know, take that step in faith and believe that you're going to get well. Yeah, you know, with everything going on, bro, like you said, we're living in this like crazy times, right? You don't know what to believe, right? There's so many things, right? You know, with this whole, you know, the virus going on and stuff like that. Which, by the way, I had COVID back in December, and I recovered from it, thank the Lord. And Dr. Grenier actually treated me with natural medicine, and I recovered fully. Me, my wife, our family. So you know, there's alternatives out there. But yeah, man. I mean, my main purpose, man, is I really want to the listener to give them hope, and for them not to give up.
Yeah, and you certainly did, brother. How can we learn more about you?
Yeah, if you want to learn more about me, if you have an email or something, you can either on this podcast, if you want to reach out, yeah, I don't mind if you want to you know, share my email.
Okay.
My email is mirizarry911@yahoo.com. If you have any questions, if you need advice, again, I'm not a doctor, but I can share what works for me. If you need someone to speak to, because I know how you know how it is, reach out through my email. I can provide my cell phone number, and you know, we can talk and connect, and hopefully we can build a relationship that can give you hope.
That's so beautiful, Mike. I really appreciate you. You're such a hard-based person, and you know, you're inspiring so many people, and you inspired me for sure, and all the people I introduced you to. And yeah, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.